very good shlokas we'll go over. Very good shlokas to remember or learn. Last time we ended on 53. So we'll do 53 to 54 to 64. Okay, text 54. Shloka we quote often, we were talking about earlier. Brahma bhuta prasanatma nasho jatina kangshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. 655, another very relevant one that we talk about often. Bhaktyamam abhijanati avanyaschasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishite tadanantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as He is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Text 56. Sarva karmanyapi sada. Sarva karmanyapi sada. Kurvano madhyapashrayaha. Mat prasadadavapnoti shashvatam padam avyayam. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee under my protection reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. Text 57. Chetasa sarva karmani maya sanyasya matpadaha puriyogam upashritya machchitasitatam bhava. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. Text 58. Machchita sarva durgani mat prasada tarishyasi ata chaitam ahankaran nashro shayashi vinangshasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness but act through the false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. Text 59. Yadahankaram ashritya nayotsya iti manyase mityaisha vyavasayaste prakritistham nayokshati. If you do not act according to my direction and do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare. Text 60. Swabhava jena kanteya nibadha svena karmana kartum nechasi yanmohat karishyasya vashopitat. Under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti. Text 61. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshe juna chishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Text 62. Tam eva sharanam gacha sarva bhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapsyasi shasvatam. O scion of Bharat, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. 63. Iti te jnanam akyatam guyat guyataram maya vimrishyai tadasheshena yatechasi tatakuru. Thus I have explained to you the most confidential of all knowledge. Deliberate on this fully and then do what you wish to do. Every time I read this, it's always my favorite shloka of the whole Bhagavad Gita. There's all the knowledge you need. Now you do what you want to do. Never forced. Okay, in text 64. Sarvaguyatamam bhuya shrinu me paramam vachaha ishtosi me dridham iti tato vakshami te hitam. Because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you the most confidential part of knowledge. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. Such nice shlokas, these like 15 shlokas. 10 we read, or 11, and then the next few be like tomorrow. It's like the conclusion, the pinnacle of the Bhagavad Gita. The 18th chapter is the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna's kind of covering over all these different topics. And it leads to like this conclusion, like the pinnacle, like the essence. And he's saying, just surrender unto me. But, these shlokas really drive deep at that point. All right, so we'll go to text 54, read it, and read the report by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who is transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. Gains devotional service. Okay, purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahma Bhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in a state of liberation, called Brahma Bhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. Wait, I'll read that again. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. Huh. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He is just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he is naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or gain because he is full in service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment because he knows that every living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see, in the material world, someone as higher and someone as lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral, and the devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, stone and gold are of equal value. This is the Brahma Bhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish, and the idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes phantasmagoria. And the senses are like broken serpent's teeth. And there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth. So there is no fear from the senses when they are automatically controlled. The world is miserable for the material infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is good as Vaikuntha. Wow. The world is miserable for the materially infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is good as Vaikuntha, or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. Very nice shloka, very nice purport. Does anybody have any thoughts? Because there's so many things Prabhupada's unpacking, and all these shlokas are really nectar. Kind of like you want to read them all, but talk about them also, so it's hard to cover it all.
Yeah, The first thing that caught my attention was the first one that you read there in that purport where Prabhupada says that in the absolute sense there's no distinction between the worshiper and the Lord, but in the higher spiritual sense the distinction is there. So I'm wondering, it kind of sounds like I don't know. I'm not going to interpret it, but I'm just wondering, is he stressing in this statement? Is he stressing one over the other? Because like, is he stressing the non-distinction over the? Because he says in the absolute sense there's non-distinction, but and still in a higher spiritual sense there's also distinction. But it sounds like he's prioritizing one over the other. Like one is primary, the other is secondary. Uh, and I know that kind of like Vishishta Dvaita, that's like the Vallabha philosophy, Vallabhacharya, and they stress like it's almost like monism, where like one is so deeply is coming to the highest form of love of Godhead, so he's identifying with Krishna. So it's like only Krishna. It's kind of like monistic where it only becomes you lose all distinction through that love. Where you're just like it's only Krishna, nothing else. And so they tend to stress the non-dual aspect. So I'm just wondering, yeah.
I mean, it seems like you know quite a bit about it, but just at least is the way Prabhupada is presenting it. In the absolute conception, there's no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. I mean, it seems as if this is alluding to a Chincha Beta Beta Tattva, where, like, in absolute sense, it's like, okay, the living entities are part and parcel with the Lord, so we're just parts of His energy, which is extensions from Him. So ultimately, coming from Him, part of Him, connected to the Lord. But a point in the previous sentence, he said, without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service to Him. So that's not in the context of being one like Mayavad. It's being one like aligned with God's will, like one in purpose. Prabhupada often makes that point where we be one with God, not one as get rid of your identity, but one with purpose, like an alignment. Shishi Gornatai Ki Jai. So, I mean, maybe we could look further into this and make a note. But as at least what I'm seeing, it's in that context. So then, in the absolute conception, there's no difference between the served and the servitor, because, like I said, the part and parcel is in accordance with the Lord and acting on His behalf and following His way. So it's like an extension of His activity, essentially. But then, in the higher sense, it's like the Lord. It's the Lord. He accepts the service, and then the servant is the server. It's like Krishna and Balaram. There's, how do you say, the God that's being served and then the God that's serving, which is Guru. So, we can make a note and ask it or, look further into it, but that's what I'm kind of seeing. Unless you have something to add, that'd be nice.
Yeah, I remember a while ago, I was like into Shaivism. Um, there's a lot of it is monistic, but there seems to be some like thing with the language because like a lot of times what is meant is that like that the individual becomes one with God through like love, just like in the sense that like you have a wife or a girlfriend or a husband or a boyfriend, and you love them so much that you're only thinking about them, and you're identifying with them more than you identify with yourself, and you like lose any conception you have of yourself. But then there's the language of like, okay, my bodies will use that merging with God, but a lot of monists will they actually mean that the former idea, but their language alludes to that, so there's a misconception. But uh, my question was like, now that like, well, when what that means, that like, okay, there's the worshipful Lord and there's the servitor Lord, and they're one, but they're also not, because there's distinction there. But so in particular, like with the servant God, is his consciousness different in that intense, like, highest form of love and worship, when they're practically one? Is his consciousness at the same degree that Krishna's consciousness is, like his personal consciousness, or like, are they on the same level in that regard, or is there still like a difference? Like, he's still an individual jiva, and he's less conscious than the Lord, or he's more minute. So like, do they quantitatively become one? Because they're qualitatively one always, but do they, in that state, do they quantitatively become one?
That's the point. That's like the big point, is that Prabhupada, always has remarked saying that, yeah, the Lord and the living entities are qualitatively one, but quantitatively, the Lord is always great and the jivas are small. So it also depends, what are we talking about? Are we talking about, as the worshiper Lord, is this the jiva? Isn't it, under jiva tattva? Or are we talking about, Ananta Shesh, Balaram, just, like another tattva, which, depending how you look at it, can be Vishnu tattva, Guru tattva. And then there's a whole other classification, but like where to make the distinction of, like, say, a jiva takes up the role of a guru and through sadhana bhakti becomes purified and becomes one with the Lord's will. At what point does, like, the guru tattva start taking over and acting? So, I mean, but I like what you say about interpretations of words. Just saw it. Oh yes, it's because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna. He is naturally always joyful. So he's kind of alluding to when one's mind is, or one's being is filled with Krishna, and service, relationship, whatever it may be. Then one comes to this platform which he's describing. So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we could talk a little bit about it, but I don't have like definitive like of like all these different like high tattvas. We could look more into it and try to find some more understanding. But the point is, this oneness isn't oneness where we merge into the Lord and we lose our identity. So that's the big distinction, I suppose. Sorry if I can't go further. I don't want to speak beyond my adhikar and start making things up. So any other points of discussion?
Hare Krishna. I liked what it said about the serpent with the broken teeth, relating to the senses. This happens, and in addition to that, yeah, that desire to merge into the Supreme Brahman, that whole idea becomes hellish. It says towards the end of the purport, there's no fear from the senses when they're automatically controlled. Automatically, that word stuck out to me. It seemed as if this happens as a result of Brahmabhuta, the senses automatically becoming controlled and mastered. This interests me, this point. You could go into depth.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was describing to you the other day. Sometime, the senses are like serpents, very dangerous. But when the sense is under control, it's like these serpents with broken teeth. A serpent without teeth it's not fearful to anybody, I mean, you might see a snake and, you're not going to look for his teeth and you're going to get out of there. But, realistically speaking, somebody who knows that serpent doesn't have its teeth, there's no ability to bite you. So automatically, what does the word automatically mean in this context? So Prabhupada often used this analogy when he quotes the shloka from, I forget where one, it's quoted in the CC, but it's quoted from another shastric source. But Sarvapadi Nirmuktam Tatpadi Dvena Nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesham Sevanam Bhaktir Uchite. Says Tatpadi Dvena Nirmalam, Sarvapadi Nirmuktam, meaning Sarva all, Upadi means like designation. Like I'm a mother, I'm a father, I am American, I am, a strong person, I am a, witty person, whatever. These designations that we place on ourselves. So Sarva Padi Vanir Muktam. Muktam means like liberate. So all these upadis will be liberated. Tat Padi Dvena Nirmalam, Hrishikeshanam, Hrishikeshanam. By engaging the senses into service of the master of the senses. And Sevanam Bhakti Uchite, by performing devotional service. So when we engage our senses in the service of the Lord, who is the master of the senses, then naturally we become freed from all these false designations, ultimately the false ego. So then it's a proper utilization of the senses. So by using the senses in this way, we're rendering service which pleases the Lord. When the Lord is pleased, then naturally we become pleased. That's what this whole thing, like that beginning of this second paragraph is talking, because Brahmabhuta Prasanatma means being one with the absolute, fully joyful. So when you're fully connected to God, you're fully joyful because you're in your constitutional position of Satchidananda. So then you have no shochati, na kankshati, no lamentation. Whatever happened in the past is the past. It's all the Lord's grace. And no desires. Whatever comes is the Lord's mercy. I accept whatever comes. And Lord Brahma, there's a famous prayer in the Bhagavatam where he says, Te nukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam vidvag vaporbir vedadhan namaste jivete yamukti pade sadayabhak. The one who goes on tolerating the results of their past karmic activity and continuing to glorify the Lord with their heart, their mind, their words, then this Brahmabhuta platform is the rightful claim. So when one is connected in that state, this Krishna consciousness, they're joyful. There's no reason to lament or worry about anything. You just are eternally in that moment of serving Krishna and depending upon Krishna. And in that way, there's no reason to fear the future. Krishna can change the future. What do I know is in the future? I mean, a lot of our anxiety and worry and everything is due to our inability to control our lives, you could say. So we're trying to manipulate and plan ahead in the future. Which plans can be good, but the point here is that instead of making material plans, we're making plans to help us advance towards this Brahmabhuta platform, which one becomes fully joyful. And when one's fully joyful, like we may go to the plaza or somewhere, the art fair, and we see things that captivate our mind. Different types of sense gratification we used to do, that we're familiar with. So the senses are like serpents, they're there and they know and they're ready to strike, get their hold on us. But when one's happy doing what they're doing, what's the question of these things? You're not even distracted because you're resolute in your determination. So, like, this is the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, but it's really interesting to think how this is a conversation. In the beginning conversation where Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, like out of the first, like, I'm guessing, but it's close, like the first 12 or 15 shlokas, maybe like 9 of them or something, is basically dealing with, you're not the body, you're a spiritual being within the body. So a lot of times we hear that, okay, we understand that, we adopt that into our life and live by that way, but we try to grasp so many other deep topics without even understanding the most basic principle which Krishna is describing to Arjuna. So then I was just thinking before I came here, I was thinking of the second chapter, text 40. You know what this is? Nihabi Krama. Oh, Haribo. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution. A little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Now, why did I think of this? Because I was actually thinking of text 41, which is Vyavisyatmika Bhutir, Ekehe Kurunandana, Bahushaka Hinantascha. Come on, I thought we went over this the other day. Purayo Vyavasayana. You'll get it, don't worry. Very important shloka, but it says, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one, Ekeha, O beloved child of the Kurus. The intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So I worded it in this way because I was thinking of text 41, so I was like, why Krishna say this? What comes before this? Because Arjuna is doubting whether he should take up the path or not. Because it's tough, it's difficult. I try so hard for this. I give up my material life. And now I tried for spiritual life and that didn't work. Now I'm stuck in the middle and what to do? Now I'm just like this weird person in the middle. No enjoyment, no spiritual realization. So Krishna is assuring Arjuna that there's no loss or diminution. A little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So many lifetimes we've spent just following the dictations of our senses and our mind. This feels good. This feels right. I'll do this. I do that. And tonight, this is the thing. Tomorrow, it's my new thing. I mean, we take up so many hobbies, so many different activities for Krishna consciousness. And what happens with these hobbies or even relationships? We get into them. It's interesting and exciting. And then sooner or later, it fizzles out. The excitement wanes. So similarly, we come to Krishna consciousness, we hear the Bhagavad Gita, we learn the kirtan. At first, it's exciting, at least in some way, because it's new, it's different, it's something like what's going on here, But then, we start to get a little familiar with it. And we can develop the same mentality of like, okay, I tried this. I tried. It was okay at first, but now, I don't think it's really there. What else is there? But it's the same mentality of trying this, getting a little bit, and then when it doesn't work for me, I pass it to the side. I pass it to the side. But Krishna is saying, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. Those who are irresolute, their knowledge is many-branched. So if we're determined in our life to approach Krishna, to approach God, to follow the proper means, to understand, then we'll mold our lives to be one-pointed. everything directing towards that. Sat. Sat means truth. It means eternal. Anything that's not connected to the ultimate reality is asat. Asat means temporary or useless. I mean, like, think about it. I'm thinking, like, when I was a kid, I used to watch sports and I'd read all the stats and learn of all the players. Completely useless knowledge. Completely. Because even if you go 10 years down the road, you know, I'm at a point now where I haven't watched sports like that for so long. And now occasionally I see like an ad or something pop up and I'm like, oh, thank God, I don't even know who any of these people are anymore. So then it's like easy to be detached from it. So point is, time doesn't stop, and everything that's material, it's asat, so it fades in the course of time. But this Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam shines because it's beyond time. This knowledge is always applicable. So those who are understanding the necessity of surrendering to Krishna, to approaching Krishna, then naturally their determination becomes resolute in purpose and unpointed. But the more irresolute our determination is, then the more we have many branches of knowledge going in different ways, all sorts of chaos in our mind, different doubts and, you know, all these things. But if we're really, really determined, Krishna's there, I want to know Krishna, Krishna will make all arrangements for us. Krishna will slash our doubts. Krishna will give us the knowledge. What does he say? There's a few shlokas where he says this. Tesham sadata yuktanam vajatam priti purvikam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. 10. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Text 11. Out of compassion for them, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with a shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So Prabhupada in the SSR, he describes what is guru. And he says, guru is one. You know, there's not this guru, that guru. Guru is one. He's delivering the truth. But if the disciple wants to be cheated by a false guru, then they can be cheated. It's because we have a desire to cheat. We don't want to surrender. So we want to take something that sounds more attractive. But what sounds more attractive is actually against our self-interest. The most attractive sounding thing is being able to render service to Krishna in any shape or form. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, there's a bhajan or somewhere he wrote that, you know, in a real humble mood, that essentially, you know, if he can't take up devotional service or whatever, please just let me take birth as a little bug inside a Vaishnava's house, just so I can somewhat have the association of a Vaishnava. Because without a Vaishnava, what's happening? All these living entities are just going up and down, up and down, up and down due to their pious and impious deeds. It's all asat, temporary, nothing substantial. So this Brahma Bhuta platform, it frees us from hankering and limitation. We just become a little bit aware. I think what it was like even before coming to the temple, especially. The whole day is filled with kankshati and shochati. All day. I want this, I want this, I gotta get this, I gotta get that. Oh, if only I didn't have to do this, if I didn't have to work today, if I didn't have to go in for this, if only this person didn't treat me like this. Always hankering and lamenting, never settle. So you start to see recurring themes what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita. Because, you know, a couple of weeks ago, whenever we were reading from previous chapter, and Krishna was talking about the austerities of the mind to be satisfied. This is be satisfied. And then also in chapter 2, where Krishna is talking about, you know, you're not your body, which is the basic instruction. He also says very, very, very early on, text 15. No, not that one. Wait, I'm on chapter 1. Chapter 2, text 15. No, maybe that's it and I'm wrong. No, yeah. Yam hina vyatyantyate purusham purusharshapa samaduka sukham dhiram somratatvaya kalpate. Well, and before that, he says, Matra sparsas tukantaya shitoshna sukadukataha agama payino nityas tam stitikshashva bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer. They arise from sense perception, O Sayana Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So happiness and distress, they're appearing out of sense perception. Our senses perceive a particular event, and then our mind processes it in a certain way, and we deem it pleasurable or unpleasurable, which leads to more hankering and lamenting. But then in the next shloka, he says, O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Steadiness and happiness and distress. Somebody who's not disturbed by it. So this is very early on. He's telling Arjuna not to be disturbed by happiness and distress and leading up to perform your duty. So then an intelligent person might ask, how do you do that? And then there's more conversations that ensue on these topics, but specifically chapter 6, Krishna describes the process of, okay, sit down, stare at the tip of your nose, sit straight, face this direction, get some kusha grass, regulate your breathing. So, in modern times, people do these pranayam. They can be helpful, to calm the mind, to go inward, but ultimately, what happens after that? You have to live your life. So if I go do pranayam and control my mind for a few minutes, okay, it's helpful, but then I have to go work and I have to step on all these ants when I'm walking, on the ground, and then I have to get food. Where does the food from? We have to, cut it down. We have to kill things, unfortunately. So the point is we're always implicated in karma, but how do we get free from the karma? So Arjuna rejects the idea of sitting and controlling the mind this way. He says it's too hard. So we just heard that Krishna said that, he basically said you can take it or leave it, but you're still going to be drawn to act by your nature because that's your nature. So what does this mean for us? We're not a warrior. We're not in line with Dharma before we come here. Most of us are just lechas from the West, eating meat, addicted to sense gratification. We have to work with our conditioned nature from where we're at and engage whatever we can in Krishna's service. As we dovetail ourselves into Krishna's service, we become purified. As we develop attachment for hearing about Krishna, then all the nonsense in the heart becomes lifted. What's this shloka? Shrinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridyantisto yabajani vidunoti saritsatam. And after that, nashta prayesh nabhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat utamashloki bhakti bhavati naishtaki. By regular studying the Srimad Bhagavatam and serving the living Bhagavat, the person living by the Bhagavatam, then the Supreme Lord is established as it's an irrevocable fact. And then what happens after the Lord's established as an irrevocable fact? Evam prasana manaso Bhagavan. No, wait. Let's see. Tadara Justamo Bhava Kamalobha Dayaschaye Cheta Eterna Vitam Stitvam Sate Prasiditi. One overcomes the lower modes of material nature and he becomes fixed in Sattva Gun. So he can have a pure consciousness rendering service. When one's fixed in that, spiritual Sattva Gun, you could say, because it's not just Sattva Gun, it's all originating from hearing and chanting with the Lord. Then, Evam Prasanna Manaso, Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate. One develops Vijnana. There's Jnana, which means knowledge. So a lot of these shlokas we're hearing, we may have Jnana. Krishna said this. Krishna's talking about this. But Vijnana, like what does it actually mean to be free from hankering and lamentation? What does it actually mean to be like equal in happiness and distress? It means a practical realization. So when one comes to this spiritual platform, one develops a practical realization that the Lord is there. So then when one has that practical realization that's solid, then what's the last one? Forgetting the Sanskrit on the spot, but basically all misgivings, all the karma, everything in the heart, all the junk in our polluted conscious is slash. Chindanti. I'm forgetting. Anyways, so it's a procession of consciousness, following what our Krishna is saying. We develop faith. When we develop faith, we want to hear, we want to serve. The more we do service and the more we hear in tandem, it becomes powerful. But the more we let our consciousness become splayed, become many branched, things become difficult. And we're worrying. But we can see when we're worrying and thinking about so many things that, aren't pertaining to like right now, my service, how can I do better? We're clearly not on the spiritual platform. So if we're not on the spiritual platform, it's like, where are we? And we can see if we're just on like the platform of the belly, if we're on the platform of the mind, platform of the intelligence. So we have to take an honest look at ourselves and see where we're at so we can advance accordingly. Because the very first teaching to Arjuna is, you're not your body. But it's hard to come off that bodily platform. So then we need the whole rest of the Bhagavad Gita is there to convince Arjuna, of all these points that Krishna is making in the second chapter. That's why the second chapter is the contents of the Gita summarized. Krishna lays it out, and then Arjuna reveals his doubts, and then Krishna elaborates more and more and more. So, sorry for going on and on. I hope there's something valuable there. Does anybody have any comments or questions or doubts or thoughts or burning reflections? Okay, so I'll just try to touch on these verses that we read and see how they go together so we can try to have an overview of what just happened. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service, and when one in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee under my protection reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such a devotional service, be fully conscious of me. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So Krishna, he says earlier on that, just worship me, love me, think me, give yourself to me. Then he says, if you can't do that, try to follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga. If you can't do that, try to do some service for me. If you can't do that, then try to, give up the fruits of your labor. You can't do that, take up meditation. If you can't do that, pursue intelligence. And then we read where Krishna said in one of these texts that, there's everything you need to know. Now its choice is up to you. So Krishna's never demanding. He's never saying you have to surrender. You have to do this. This is your life, Prabhu. You must surrender. Give it up. No, Krishna never says this. We see other preachers, they may present a message. You need this, you need that, or you're gonna, suffer forever. So Krishna never says this, but we need to understand what Krishna's saying, what he's providing. He's providing the intelligence to act in a pure state of consciousness that frees you from all your material problems and brings you into this Brahma Bhuta platform, acting on behalf of Krishna. And then, you realize God and you go through this whole procession that I just said. Hey, you wanted to say something?
Krishna never says outright, you have to do this, but oftentimes this is like the pressure that I feel being here at the temple. I feel as if it's like that, is this coming from myself or from anticipating the needs of the devotees around me, or it's very stressful to not be at that place, but to feel like I need to be at that place.
Which place?
Place of being fully conscious of Krishna.
You would totally need to be in that place. If you're not in that place, it's a bad place. Yeah, this is unfortunate, an expert preacher knows how to reach people in whatever way that they can most grasp the philosophy to encourage them to continue on the path. But when we're in the association of devotees, especially close association, it can be like being in a fire, where you get too close to a fire, and what happens? You get burned. It's hot. But if you go too too far away from the fire, it's cold, and you struggle. So we need to find like the balance where we need association of devotees, and if we're new and we're not convinced, then yeah, generally we're being helped by other devotees, by their realizations, but they're often sharing things that make us look deep into our heart, deep into our mind, and revealing things that are difficult to swallow. But one can rest assured that the only reason that they could do that is because they have practical realization of that themselves. And Krishna's never saying you have to surrender. But if you understand what he's saying, he's thoroughly convincing Arjuna why surrender unto him is the only thing worth doing. Anything else is futile. But at the same time, you can still do what you want to do. So this is God giving us our free will. So I like the analogy where if God wanted to have all of us just act exactly how he wanted to act, it's like if you had, like you were a technology guy, and you had like these little robots all around you, and you design them and they look all different, like cute ways and stuff. And they're doing all these little tasks. You give them names and everything, It's like, you like it, but then sooner or later it's like, man, the robots are boring, Don't they do anything like interesting or different? So if God wants us to act like these robots, we can do that. Krishna just completely has us acting however he wants us to act. But he gives us free will because ultimately he wants to enjoy the relationships with the living entities who are all completely individual and have their own personality. Krishna is like a connoisseur, a collector of these relationships. It's rasa, it's taste, it's nectar there. So it's interesting because we may have a lack of surrender within ourselves, but we may find ourselves around more advanced devotees who are pushing for surrender, and it could make us feel this uncomfortable way. But if we get on that wavelength then you also too very quickly pick up why you want to do it. And then if you just pick up on that vibe and take that into your devotional service, then Krishna will reciprocate with you, and you'll realize why you want to surrender more, why that's there. But if you're always on the platform of thinking like, I don't know, they're saying this, it sounds good, it sounds convincing, but I want to do this, but I want to do that. And there's always something lacking. We're always on the outside. So then that fire will burn hotter because these other devotees are speaking from a platform of actually wanting to help us, because they can see somebody spent their whole life on the mental platform, and now by Krishna's grace, they may be getting taste and glimpses in what it's like to get off the mental platform. So they could very easily see when somebody else is on the mental platform and how much it's not fun, not fun at all. So then some devotee preachers can be like surgeons going into our hearts. Look at this. Did you think about this? You're saying this, but really, look. Oh, you don't think so? Let's question this. Let's look at that. And then the more you start to look, and you're like, man, is he a psychic or something? Like, why does he keep saying all these things that just like it's too heavy? So I can't speak for everybody else, but I'm sure most devotees can relate to this experience. I know I can, spending time with senior devotees. And it's like, there was this gardener with me, and he's like ripping into my heart, and he's like, look at the weeds. And I'm like, no, they don't exist. He's like, look, they're here. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want this. I just want to like be peaceful. But Krishna's never telling Arjuna to be peaceful. This is the thing. This is a hard thing to accept, where it's like we come to spiritual life because we're fried out by the material world and we want to be peaceful and, all this. Peaceful is good. I mean, it's one of the traits of a Brahmana. It's not a bad thing. But the point is to act on behalf of God and what Krishna wants. This is actually for the supreme good for everybody. So Arjuna's killing warriors, but he's acting on behalf of Krishna. So it's much better than being peaceful. This is the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita, is to wake us up that this material world is not peaceful, and that to render service, to perform our duty in union with God, this actually brings the fulfillment we're looking for, that wholesomeness. And then any activity we do when we're on that platform, whether it be sweeping the floor, dressing the deities, the dishes, preaching, it's all absolute. It's all connected to Krishna. But some devotees may get a little bit more excitement, like a jolt out of this service, out of that service. And what I've heard from senior devotees, in the beginning, we just try to surrender. Just try to surrender and try to be open and do as many services. And then as time goes on, naturally, our conditioned nature kind of comes out. And we see, okay, like there's certain things that I really didn't like at first, but I actually have a knack for it. So it's like, maybe let me do these things for Krishna's service. And Prabhupada was expert at this. Prabhupada would see his disciples, some were proficient in certain activities, and some he just empowered them. You're going to go here to this country and open up a temple. I don't want to. And then he sent Borijan Prabhu to China, and he was like in China alone. I'm pretty sure he wrote Prabhupada, and it was like, I have no association here. It's so difficult. It's so tough. And then you know what Prabhupada did? He found a woman, one of his disciples, and sent her there, and they got married. He was like, okay, now you have association. So Prabhupada really empowered some jivas, and those who stuck with it and tried to fulfill the order of Prabhupada, they became very empowered. But we always have to maintain our determination and be free from offenses, because There's also others who served Prabhupada very closely and did lots of service, but then they developed all sorts of misconceptions and disastrous situations happen. But Krishna, he says, there's no loss or diminution, just a little, whatever we can do in this path, it never goes in vain because it's for Krishna and Krishna is always cognizant. But whatever we're doing besides that, I mean, not trying to go too late, but point is, just imagine like, some of the funnest things you did in your life, at the time it was so special, so great, but after some time it becomes so minuscule, like nothing. So it's like yesterday was Mother's Day. All of our mothers had a kid. We grew up, we were a baby, we were their world. But then we get old and we leave and we have to live our life. It's like you can't hold on to anything here. But whatever we do for Krishna, Krishna always holds on to us. He says, finisher, he says, the one who always sees me, I'm never lost to him, and he's never lost to me. So the more that we're always holding on to Krishna, he's always there to protect us. We have to have faith and follow in the footsteps of the acharyas, not concoct our own way to follow. So Srimad Bhagavad Gita says, Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Sri Ki Jai.